afternoon, my friends. My name is Josh Decker. Let me turn this down just a smidge for a second. I'll turn it off in a second. I am so glad that you are joining me. We are at the end of October. Larry, what's happening, man? October is Down Syndrome Awareness Month. Katie, hello. Welcome. And, I had the intent of spending all month talking about Down syndrome and the things that are true and the things that are misunderstood, and I failed. So now it's time to get on it. I don't care that October is the end of the month, but even within, Pam, hello, even within the Down syndrome community, what we find is there is a lot of misunderstanding about Down syndrome. And so I'm going to be doing a series of videos, hopefully, excuse me, bear with me. Sorry about that. I'm still trying to get over my annual cough here. But over the next, hopefully, several days, I'm going to be doing a few videos to talk about some of what my wife and I have learned over the last really 6 months as we have studied and learned from a very, very smart group of people, including an MIT educated biochemist. And so, people that are just blowing my mind, they're so smart, but helping us to understand what is misunderstood about our children with Down syndrome. Carrie Ann, hello, welcome. And so I want to share some of that with you. So let me tell you a little bit about myself and my family, and then we will talk a little bit about what we wanted to actually talk about. So again, my name is Josh Decker. We have 3 amazing boys. We have an 11-year-old, a 5-year-old, and our 2-year-old son, who is our blessing with Down syndrome. Genevieve, hello, welcome. And so when we got the news that my wife was pregnant, excuse me, with our, hopefully this kicks back in here because I forgot to turn off the phone function on my phone. Go figure. So we were kind of blown away and excited all at the same time about going to be having a third child. We have, like I said, an 11-year-old, and with him, he had some very interesting things. We ended up seeing a lot of doctors because somebody at some point said, he's got some sort of genetic something going on. And so we want to try and help you figure out what's going on to see if there's anything more major we need to be concerned about. And so we delayed having more children because of all that was tied up with him. And then we had our second, and he was healthy and amazing and followed some of the same delays that our oldest did. And then we said, you know what, great, and maybe we want to have another kid. We were talking about it, and then boom, it happened, right? As I'm sure all of us have experienced at some time, when, in terms, excuse me, in terms of us having our children, especially if it was not something that we were like, oh yeah, I'm really trying. Yeah, anyway, that's a whole nother conversation for another day. Angela, what's happening? Rebecca, hello. And so, what happened with us, my wife we had 2 boys already, and she really, really wanted a girl. And my cousin had just had a child, and so they had told us about this test that you could do at 10 weeks to find out the gender of your kid. Now, if you know this test, it's actually a genetic screening. And so my wife was really excited. She didn't want to wait for, the 20 weeks to find out what we were having, because she wanted to know, do I need to get new clothes? Are we going to have a girl? Are we going to have, what are we going to do? And so she told the OB that she wanted to have this test done. And the OB was like, well, it's fine. It's a genetic screening. She's like, right, but it'll tell me what we're having, right? She's like, yeah. She's like, well, I don't really care about the rest of it. Can you just not tell me if there's anything else going on? The doctor was like, no, we kind of have to tell you. And she was like, well, can you tell my husband instead of me? No, we have to tell you, our patient. Okay, great. So she went ahead and did the test, and the results came back, and our baby was flagged as probable Down syndrome. And that rocked our world. I remember when we got the call from our doctor, well, her doctor, and we were in the car coming home, and the doctor didn't, say, hey, we need to talk, come into the office or anything. She just told her right on the phone. We didn't stay with that doctor for very long after that. And I remember just my wife being completely devastated. And for me, like growing up, I don't remember. There was a show. I can't remember what the name of it was. I can kind of hear the theme song in my head, but there was an older child with Down syndrome in the family. And Randy, what's happening? And I remember watching that as a child, and that instilled in me kind of this fear of one day having a child with a significant special need like that, and that being kind of an underlying fear of mine. And so when we got the call and the doctor said, hey, guess what? Excuse me, you're going to have a child with Down syndrome. I remember it rocking my world, my wife's world. And we were just like, okay, what does this mean? And so, all of you that have kids with Down syndrome, that meant, a whole lot of, yes, Angela, thank you. Life goes on. Yes. All right. I'm glad somebody else remembers that show. Michelle, what's happening? And so the whole process started. We were sent to go see perinatology, and we were sent to see a genetics counselor and all of this stuff. And I remember the big thing that kept getting hammered home to us is well, the chances of this baby surviving pregnancy are very low, so you should just terminate the pregnancy. You've got 2 other kids, you got to think about them. What if this pregnancy risks your life as mom, and and this will completely change your family. And my wife and I, the way that we believe, we're like, it doesn't matter what we know or what we don't. We're gonna have this baby, and if God chooses to take that baby from us, so be it. But we're not gonna act as the hand of God. And so that's where we were, and it was really tough because the doctors we were working with didn't really seem to get it, and so it was a very, very stressful pregnancy. But once our child was born, he spent 2 weeks in the hospital. And man, that was a tough 2 weeks for us. And some of what we kept getting told is, well, this is common for Down syndrome. Well, this is common for Down syndrome, or whatever. We got this, amazing book. I'm sure some of you have it. It's around here on one of my shelves. Oh, here it is. I'm sure some of you have probably read, this book. Amazing guide for understanding some of the things that are going on with Down syndrome. But the challenge is that what we are constantly told as a Down syndrome community is, well, this is just fine. It's just normal. This is just normal for them. And all that means, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking about kids with Down syndrome or people that are aging or whatever, all it means when we talk about health and something is normal is just that it is common. It doesn't mean that has to be the way that it is. And it doesn't mean that there's no other options, right? That it's inevitable. There we go. It doesn't mean that it's inevitable. So there are certain things that come with Down syndrome that, some kids, have major heart defects or, gastrointestinal, abnormalities or, these kind of things. Structurally, there's not anything we can do about those kinds of things. But some of the other things that are diagnostic overshadowing. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Angela, speaking of that, I went to the doctor recently and they told me that I had prediabetes, and I said, okay, fine. And the way my wife and I think, we like to look for what we need to change before we jump on medications, right? If medications are needed, fine, but we want to explore everything else we can first. And I remember meeting with the PA, and her comment to me was, well, yeah, eventually this is going to just happen for you. And it's like, no, not if I do what I need to do at this point. Anyway, so yes, diagnostic overshadowing, predicting the future that is a little bit unpredictable. Anyway, so what we have learned in working with the group that we have worked with and getting to know some of the scientists that are, like I said at the beginning, are way smarter than we are, is that there's a lot that we know about the genetics of Down syndrome. Now, the basics, right? We all know this part. Down syndrome is an extra copy of the 21st chromosome. Okay, that's what it is. What we are told commonly is that it affects everybody differently. That is both true and not true. What's true about that is there's a lot of things that happen prenatally that, from the research that I've read and understand, that will affect what the health of a child is when they are born. And that's true for kids with Down syndrome and without, right? But it's kind of more pronounced with kids with Down syndrome. And so, there's a lot of things that happen, like I said, in terms of nutrition and how the body absorbs and processes nutrients and things like that, that will affect what happens right after a child is born. As you get into past that, like, emergency stage of being firstborn, is the heart okay? Is the digestive tract okay? Is everything connected where it needs to be? All those things that could be critical for life in the first, weeks and months. Once you get past that, now we start getting to a stage where, yes, there's still some things that are unique to every one of our kids, but there's also a set of things that are common. And that's because when you look at the 21st chromosome and its duplication, thankfully, the entire chromosome is not active. There's a small section of it that is called the Down syndrome critical section, and that is what's active. The rest of it is there, but it's not really doing anything in the body. And so what that means is this section is the one that's affecting how our kids process foods, how our kids' minds work, and things of that nature. And there's been a ton of things that have been done in terms of understanding genetics and mapping the genome to understand this. And the 21st chromosome is actually one of the first chromosomes that was mapped and sought to be understood. Excuse me. So there's a lot that we know that because of this section that's active on that extra copy of the 21st, these things are going to be consistent. And so that's what I want to spend the next several videos that I'm going to do and share with you, talking about some of the things that we know to be consistent. Now, I'm not the scientist. My background is business and marketing, and I was a youth pastor for a while, and so definitely I am not the scientist. My goal is to take what we've learned and break it down for you in little bite-sized chunks to help you understand. Why is this important, though? Why would you take the time to come back and listen to this and to understand? Because we are the best advocates for our kids, whether it's in school, whether it's at the doctor's office, right? Now, how you advocate for your child is completely up to you. I firmly believe that the best way to advocate is to be as knowledgeable as we can, to come to the table knowing it. None of the doctors we work with are experts in Down syndrome. We have to be the experts in Down syndrome. And so we have to be the ones to say, listen, this is what's going on. This is why this is happening, because all most doctors do and therapists and most of the people in our team, all they do is look and say, well, yep, this is common because it's the things that they see frequently with kids with Down syndrome. But they never ask the question why. When you ask the question why, there's something that can be done about it. So for instance, my son, our 2-year-old, had a real problem with reflux, right? And we kept asking, well, why is this? Why is this? What's going on? What's going on? Excuse me. And the doctor and the therapist we were seeing were really pushing us to go see GI. Great. We still may end up seeing GI, but at this point we haven't yet. Why? Because the research that we have seen and the experience that we have shared, so what we have seen other people go through, is that when a child with Down syndrome has reflux, typically what happens is GI says, great, let's put him on or her on an antacid medication like Prilosec or Prevacid or whatever they're called, right? And let's deal with that. Those are called PPIs, by the way, is the I guess technical term for those. It's an inhibitor of some sort to help reduce the amount of acid. But in most cases, those are ineffective. And the reason why those are ineffective in most cases is because the reflux is not actually caused by an overabundance of acid. It can be caused by too little acid. So you start feeding your child and there's not enough acid to actually deal with it. And so what happens is the body starts kicking out more acid really quickly to try and be able to digest things, and then out comes the food. In the case of our son, what I think was actually the case is he was tongue-tied, but not at the front of the tongue, which is called a posterior tongue tie. It was an anterior tongue tie, which is in the back of the tongue, which is commonly missed because when the child sticks out his tongue, it doesn't dimple in, right? It's not something easy to see. We went to a dentist who, I did some research. She was very familiar with this, and she looked and said, yep, there it is. And so we started talking about what that does. So imagine, right, if you had a piece of skin on your arm, like right under here, and you couldn't like lift up your arm. You'd never learn how to do anything with your arm. Well, the back of the tongue is needed for manipulating food down the throat, okay, for getting a good latch on a nipple, whether it's, you know, a woman's nipple or a nipple on a bottle, whatever. And like when you think about that, and our son at 2, almost 3 years old, still takes bottles because we've had a lot of issues with aspiration. He's had aspiration pneumonia, gosh, more times than I can count. And we found out that this could actually be a contributor to why, right? They did swallow studies. They said, yep, he's aspirating, but never asked the question why, right? And fortunately, one of our friends who has a child about the same age told us about this. And she said, man, as soon as we got this taken care of, boom, the reflux was done. And so we went and saw the doctor, and we said, okay, doc, what can you tell me about this? Can you, or dentist, can you see if this isn't an issue? And she said, yep, it is. So we had it taken care of. That was 3, almost 4 weeks ago now. And we've definitely seen an increase. Now, is that his only issue? Possibly not, right? But why go jump on something like a PPI when the issue isn't actually too little acid? It's a structural issue, right? And so that's why we have to be very careful of accepting this is common, right? And start asking the why questions. And so anyway, a lot longer than I expected to go. So that's what we're gonna do. So I appreciate you being here and listening to this part of our story. I will definitely be back. Like I said, I'm gonna try and do these every day and walk through some of what we've learned, some of what we know about that Down syndrome critical region of the 21st that actually affects them, and what that means, what we know about things like medications that we're aware of at this point, that, and by all means, what we know is not an exhaustive list, it's just what we've learned, medications that you need to be careful of, and why. Some of those things is what we want to share. So I hope that that you got a little bit of enjoyment out of this. I hope that you come back and learn, because we can only advocate as well as we are educated. So Genevieve, absolutely my pleasure. Just so you know, my heart, I am a teacher at heart. Like I said, I was a youth pastor for 10 years. And so I love to share what is going to impact people. And this information is so, it's still not very well known throughout our community. And so I just have such a desire to help share it. And so if you would, man, I would love to see more people, share this, or, understand this. So if you're connected with other parents, especially if it's, excuse me, newer parents with young children with Down syndrome, like I said, mine is going to be 3 in January, so still pretty young. He's just starting to walk. I'll have to bring him on maybe next time I do this tomorrow. But anyway, so that's all for today. Thank you again for joining. Taylor from there. Angela, we are going to talk about TNI at some point. Yep, absolutely. And we got to lay the foundation first. So, but yep, absolutely. So, all right, cool. Well, thanks again. And I look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow. All right, bye.